Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first monthly committee meetings for 2022, this January the 11th. I'd like to welcome Deputy Mayor McCollman and all of the councillors, and we have our CAO Rob Philpott with us, and our Director of Finance, Kristen Dunsford, and our electrical engineer, Greg Goody, is with us, as well as our technical services engineer, Aaron McDonald. And we have Brian Harlick on the controls here on my left from Human Resources. And so we'd like to welcome all of the viewers on YouTube tonight and members of the media watching. And also we want to wish everybody a happy New Year. And Councillor Adams is with us by phone and online. She said to advise everybody that she's isolating and she will be back on the go this Friday coming. So we wish her all the best, but she'll be participating in the meeting tonight online. So we'll continue on. Is there a motion to approve the agendas? We'll start out with tech services. I believe you're first, Councillor Duran.
Yes, Your Worship.
We'll turn it over to you, sir.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I believe this item, stop sign at Crozier Avenue and Heron Drive, was submitted by Councillor Adams, so I will happily turn things over right away and she can take over live from isolation.
Okay, thanks everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I was notified of this years ago when we first were elected that it was an issue there on Crozier and Heron. There's currently a stop sign on Heron, but what has happened is due to Lafergie building up and traffic getting heavier, people are now cutting across, coming down Sinclair onto Crozier to access the remainder of Lafergie subdivision. And in addition, it's also a bus stop. So parents have some concern there because traffic does not stop at any time when the kids are walking and trying to cross the road at that intersection. So I had sent a message to ask to get it put on the agenda and for tech services to look into it. So we're here tonight to see what they come up with.
All right, thanks, Councillor Adams. This is Rob. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I gotcha.
Good, thank you. So the process that we normally have used with respect to any of these requests of, I'll call it of a traffic management nature, is that usually what will happen is that we'll bring the request back to council. Well, first of all, the councillor will present the request to council. We'll get direction from council to research it and look into it. And I know, Councillor Adams, you can't see this right now, but up on our councillor's video screens is a map of the area. And I guess what we're looking to just to confirm is that first of all, just to confirm the nature of the request is that we're looking for a three-way stop at the corner of Crozier and Heron. Is that correct? Four-way, sorry?
It'd be a four-way. There's currently, no, it's down, yeah, no, that's not right. That map does not look right. It's down further, Rob.
Okay.
There's a stop sign now on Heron at Crozier, right? But
it's where Malcolm Miller used to live, is that intersection.
Oh, that's up
There's two intersections of Heron and Crozier. There's the first one and the end.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Okay, so we're looking for a four-way. Okay, so a four-way stop at that location. That's what we're. Okay. So I guess right here. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we just first of all we want to clarify the location that we're talking about here. What we'll do is we'll ask tech services and police services to review this and bring a recommendation back to council at our. What would you think, Aaron, in terms of timing? Just meeting, I guess, yeah. Next meeting? Okay.
could verify to see what we have as far as data. I remember us being in there a couple of years ago, but I don't remember what all locations we collected data at, but we certainly can dig through to see what we have and come back to us and say what we found for existing information, or if we have to make a recommendation on that, or if we have to wait and do actual data collection there. We'll dig through our archives and see what we have in the last few years.
Okay.
Just so I'm clear on this, where are we talking about here? The four-way stop at the corner of Heron and what's the other street?
Crozier.
Crozier.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
Crozier like wraps around, your worship, like
Yeah.
it goes to the bottom as well, right?
Yes, yeah, I see that, yes.
Yeah, my apologies. I was looking at the bottom of Crozier Drive in Heron, and that's why I came up with the three-way stop. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that it wraps around there. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's on the upper Lafarge.
Okay, got it.
Is there a bus stop in that location too?
There is a bus stop there, so that's what's sort of tricky about if we do a traffic count now, because obviously that's not going to be taken into consideration, so we have to sort of add that to it as well when we're thinking about it.
Okay. All right. So if council is okay with what you've heard so far, we'll bring back a recommendation at our next meeting with respect to a four-way stop at that location. In the meantime, if we're able to get some of that data pushed out to you ahead of time, we'll certainly do that as well. Okay?
Would the recommendation be whether it's safe or will the traffic numbers be in the recommendation, or is it both?
We'll have the traffic numbers to support a recommendation as to whether a four-way stop is warranted. Now, council, if, for argument's sake, if we felt that the traffic numbers, we being staff, felt that traffic numbers didn't support having a four-way stop there, that doesn't mean the council has to support the recommendation, right? Okay?
Can I just ask a question?
Yep.
Councillor Adams, have you had requests for this stop sign to be put in there? Is that what's happening right now?
Have I what? Sorry, I can't.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carrie. Have you had a number of requests for that stop sign to go there? Is that what's driving this?
I have had in the area, I have had so far 5 families.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Carrie.
Okay.
Okay.
That's pretty clear.
Okay. Any questions, Councillor Adams? Because I know you had brought forward this request.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Councillor Drawn, you have,
That's all I have actually for the tech services agenda. It was just that one item, so I will hand things back over to you, Your Worship.
okay, thank you. And if you get anything else and you wanted to mention, time will be there. We'll continue on with Municipal Services. Councillor McDougall, the floor is yours, sir. Whatever the item is.
Just turn that over to
Climate
our
risk.
CAO.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Chair. This was an item that was requested to be placed on the agenda by Councillor McFeely.
Yeah.
And we do have a presentation that Councillor McFeely is going to be making here, and of course myself and Director Heron and Director Gregg are here to answer any questions that Council may have with respect to the presentation and the information contained therein. Okay?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rob. And this is something I've been thinking about for some time, a little bit, and had some time to do a little more reading over the holidays, so I asked for it to be placed on the agenda. And really kind of hit home for me last August, I think it was, when I was looking at the provincial government's new risk assessment maps that they have. And you can go on there and zero rate in on your property. Anyways, when in zeroed in on Summerside, you start to see a picture of the risks that we're facing, and by 2050, even like 25 years from now. And there's, in my view, there's really a need to start thinking about some of that stuff and begin to build some resiliency around it. And we know we're having more events and more more serious events. We know just before Christmas in the fall there, I think we had some washouts down around one of the fish retail places there downtown. And that's probably going to become the norm as opposed to the exception going forward here. So I just been thinking about this a little bit all fall and sort of understanding how we may move forward. Some of us participate in the exercise around the Quest report back in 2019, I think it was, and they produced, I think, a very robust report, and there's some, good information and some great recommendations in that report. So I thought it was time to really begin to have a discussion about the implementation of some of those recommendations. So anyways, asked for it to be on the agenda. So put a little presentation together. So a very, very high level synopsis of the situation, and I can go through that, and Greg and Aaron can talk about some of the good things and some of the things that they're doing in municipal services and tech services now to address some of the really adoptive kinds of things around climate change, and then Rob talked a little bit about sort of how we move forward, and it's really around talking about a climate adaptation strategy, and some of the readings, and I can't even remember where I read this, and Rob I think has read the same information that for every $1 you spend now, you save $6 dealing with the emergency afterwards. So it makes a whole lot more sense to be proactive than trying to deal with it after the fact. And so that's sort of the premise why I kind of thought it's a discussion that we should have and continue. We've had it before, and continue that discussion. I think we need to kind of make it front of center every once in a while, so that we keep on bumping it forward in some way, shape, or form. So really just to refresh people's memory, like the Quest report talks about, what the impacts will be. It talks about atmospheric hazards, and those, things like storms and blizzards and increased frequency of ice storms, those types of things. When the number of hot days is expected to quadruple in the foreseeable future, and we can expect more sea surges. So what can we do at the front end to protect ourselves against some of these things? Hydrological hazards, and that's really around rising sea levels and coastal flooding, increased precipitation. We can expect increased precipitation, particularly in the winter and the spring. Power outages, the lack of resources for extended power outages, and how can we protect our system and to ensure that doesn't happen. Food security, we know that we're all into this on-time delivery now, so the store shelves get empty if the bridge is closed for 48 hours, and what happens if that bridge is out of commission for an extended period of time, for days or weeks or months? So how do we protect ourselves against some of that stuff? And then contamination and hazard material spills, and those are things that we talked about when I think Jared came in and talked about the Quest report and stuff like that. So those are the kinds of hazards that we will be facing going forward, and so since the Quest report was done, there's other documentation that kind of brings it to light. The federal government completed the Canada Climate Change report, and there's a whole Atlantic perspective in that, and a whole piece in there around coastal communities, and some coastal communities have really stepped up their game in terms of having offices now that they're really looking at this and looking at ways they can mitigate things that are going to be happening going forward here. So, of course, our own Quest report in 2019, which is really thorough and has some great recommendations in it. one that I read had a peek at over the holidays was the FCM Municipal Climate Adaptation Maturity Scale. It's really just a checklist of things, and you go in and sort of see how mature your community is around this stuff. And I didn't complete the thing. I wouldn't have had all the knowledge to complete the thing, but it just raised a whole lot of concerns for me when I kind of looked at it and said, geez, I'm not sure we're doing a whole lot in this area, or we're okay here, but we're not doing much here. So, those are things that perhaps council, if they want to take a look at, that's an interesting one, because it's kind of almost like a report card on where we're at in this type of stuff, so it was interesting. And the one that really got me doing all the thinking about this was looking at the Prince Edward Island Climate Change Risk Assessment. That's brand new. That was released in August, I believe, 2021. And that's where I kind of got looking at that in terms of my own property, and then got looking at the city of Summerside, and there's a link to it there, and I think Brian's going to put that up. It'll give you a sense of so that gold there, if you zoom in on it a bit, Brian, that gold, what that represents is a moderate flood hazard by 2025. So, by 2050, excuse me. So, like 25 years from now, the city is at a moderate risk that we'll have flooding in those areas, is how I interpret the map. So it's concerning, and I think it's something we need to start thinking about in terms of what remedial kinds of things we can begin to do to prevent this from happening. And it's much more acute than, we talked about this even 3 or 4 years ago, that like this kind of stuff was 50 years out or 100 years out, and it was hard to get people's attention. But if we're talking 25 years out, it's time that we give it attention. And so I thought that map for me was very, very revealing in terms of the exposure that we have as a community going forward here. That kind of really brought it home for me. The other thing that was kind of driving my thoughts around this thing was I know the federal government, because of all the events that have happened across the country, are talking about a major climate adaptation strategy that'll have major dollars attached to it. So we can develop a municipal strategy and have ourselves well positioned to be able to take advantage of any funding opportunities that come forward here down the road. Sort of have not unlike the MRF program, if you have shovel-ready projects, you can react quickly and access the dollars. So I think it would be prudent for us to be sure that we have our homework done and know what needs to be done, and identify potential projects when that dollars start to flow. And I believe there will be significant federal dollars coming forward, because I think the government see this as a major issue right across the country, not just here. So we need to be one step up in terms of being able to take advantage of that. And I also know that FCM has some significant dollars tied to climate change initiatives. So, but I think we have some front end work to do before we're in the position to be able to take advantage of some of that stuff. So how do we build climate resiliency? And this is right out of the FCM's Municipalities for Climate Change Initiative program. So we evaluate how your community incorporates climate adaptation into policy, staffing, and managing risks within projects and teams. Identify practical outcomes to achieve in each area to move your municipality to the next level, no matter where we're starting from. And I think, we're not starting from ground zero here. We've got the Quest report, and I know Aaron and Greg have implemented and initiated activity already. So we're not at ground zero here. We're somewhere along the continuum. Quickly identify areas for potential improvement in your municipality's current climate change adaptation practices. So I think, with a little exercise, we can probably do that. and advance along at a pace that suits your community's needs, size, and resources. And you know, and there will be some resource requirements here to move this forward. So with that, I just want to kind of maybe raise the level of awareness and concern about it. And then maybe get Greg and Aaron to talk a little bit about, you know, and there are some good positive things happening now in the city, and then Rob maybe talk about, but sort of how we move forward here, so. That's it for me.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor.
Can I just make a comment there before you start? And thank you for that presentation, Brian. And you're right, a lot of programs through FCM there that probably could be and should be and will be tapped into, not only by Summerside, but all municipalities across the country. And I think there are 2,000 municipal governments as members of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And so, but I'll just throw this in. I had something mentioned to me last week by a local business, and I saw your map up there, Councillor McFeely. The land is washing away between, it's on Queen Street, between the Journal and the fish, JMK Fish. So I've turned it over to the Port Authority, and that land that's washing away is not part of the port, it's city land. And there's probably 15 or 20 feet gone there in the last, because, and all they said that it needed was some larger rocks, because within a few years it's going to be getting pretty close to Harbour, or I was going to say Harbour Drive, Heather Moyes Drive. So that's, it's happening right here beside us. So that's something that come budget time, I'm sort of wandering off a little bit of your subject, but in a way I'm not. Come budget time, we'll have to consider that as far as what's taking place with the washing away of our land. That's a bit of a park there right now, but the chairs are getting moved back, especially after every windstorm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. CEO.
And just before we move on, thanks, Councilor McFeely, for bringing this topic forward. As Chair of the Atlantic Caucus, this has been put up as a priority for the Atlantic provinces. We're surrounded by water. But I just was looking at that map that was up there previous, and if you go back 3 or 4 weeks, it might have even been 3 weeks, I don't think I've seen a higher tide in this town ever. It was way above the last one. Yeah. Anyway, so again, I'll turn it back to Rob. But
and I guess that's another reason why I brought it forward, because I watch that tide all the time now, and I'm sitting up there and I'm looking and saying, man, I've never seen anything like this before.
I got a kayak for sale in case anybody's know.
All right, thank you, Councillor McFeely and Mayor Councillor McDougall, for your comments. Before I turn it over to Greg and Aaron just to talk about, I'm not going to give you an exhaustive list of all the things that we've identified, but just to talk in general about some of the things we've done over the last 3 to 5 years. Council should take away a level of comfort that both Tech Services and Municipal Services, when they're doing their capital planning and we present our capital budgets to Council every year for consideration, we are looking at a lot of these issues through a climate lens, and I'll call it a mitigation lens to the extent that we can, realizing, of course, that there's budget pressures in other areas as well, but I guess we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't at least identify like some of the climate-related issues that we see, not only short-term, but also longer-term. And the Quest report certainly provides a good starting point for that. But what I'll do is just to give members of council and the community an idea of some of the things that we have looked at and have done and continue to look at. I'll turn it over to Greg and Aaron, and they can fill you in a little bit. Okay. Yep.
Sorry, is my mic on? Sorry. We have a directors meeting for the Atlantic Mayors Congress. There's one from each province, and I'm there representing PEI, and this will be on the agenda as well, as just to get a feel of the other municipalities, how they may be dealing with this or thinking about dealing with it. And so if I get some information of that, I'll make sure it's passed around to staff and council.
I can start. Greg here, Director of Municipal Services for City of Summerside. So I always look in my portfolio, I kind of wear 2 hats. One is operational resiliency for the infrastructure of water, sewer, and roads for the city, and the second one is the electric utility for basically emergency measures, that type of thing for the community. So the things we've been doing on a regular basis is improving our, I'll say, our standby generation throughout the infrastructure to make sure that key sewer lift stations and water supply wells can operate. And with the addition and planning expertise of Heron, when they added the second well field, that also got generation standby. So the city's water supply, for example, protected from power outages, is quite good. The other secondary thing that they look at when they're planning the wells and locations is brackish inclusion from seawater rise. So we're monitoring on a regular basis the brackish content of water supply in the city of Summerside. So operationally, we monitor that and report on it and see if there's going to be an impact to water availability in Summerside, and constantly planning ahead of that. On a second note, there's also planning in the works to do what they call infiltration and inflow protection. So when you get large rainfall events of, we experienced some this last fall of almost 100 millimeters in a short period of time, and that water ends up getting into the sewer pipes, and then that sewer pipes can overflow the sewage treatment plant and cause it to get at a capacity. So we've been looking at that lately and seeing the events affect the wastewater treatment plant, so we're planning on getting work done to stop that infiltration from happening and tighten up our sewer system, and try to educate residents and not to connect sump pumps to their sewer system, which adds loads to the wastewater treatment plant. The second thing we're doing in operations, it's actually slated for this year, next year, is to do a biosolids loading report for the wastewater treatment plant. So we've designed and operated that plant now for almost 12 years. It was designed for 40 years, so we need to take a snapshot of where it's at in its life cycle and then start planning to make sure we protect the harbor from pollutants from wastewater. Secondly, we also start increasing our fleet size of generators and tow-behind generators that we can cycle around for those that don't have permanent generators. So we have fuel storage on site at our operations building in 95 Ottawa Street at the power plant. Right now, the power plant roughly has close to 72 hours of run capability with the fuel storage it has. And it all links back, and we try to make sure that for 72 hours we can give residents some stability so that they can be prepared. You know, that 72-hour preparedness kit that public safety talks about for these unfortunate events. And then after that 72 hours, hopefully the EMO office is up and ready, and there's warming centers set up and things like that to support clients that can't get regular services. So that's kind of how we set it up. On the electric utility side, we've also recognized that we have a substation at 94 Ottawa Street that is very close to sea level rise. It's not quite exactly on the contour, but it's right adjacent to it. And if you look at the 50 and 100-year sea level rises, it's about the 6-meter mark in Summerside for contour level today. And that puts it pretty close to substation. So we have plans to make another substation at the higher parts of the city to accommodate that future protection of the electric utility infrastructure. The second thing we do in the electric utility is we build with Hendrix wiring, and you probably see that around, and our reliability is quite good as far as storms go from tree contacts and things. We're constantly expanding that infrastructure to be more resilient. There's still some areas that need improvement, but every time we build something new, we try to build it with Hendrix, so it's much more robust, and stronger poles we use as well for higher wind events than what you'd see elsewhere on the island. The final thing we try to do is our redundancy is we try to keep a spare plow for our contractors as well as for our own operations, so we experience breakdowns for reacting to snow events. So that's some of the operations things we do. We also have mutual aid agreements with other utilities, electric utilities, to help with linemen and resources should we need it in major catastrophes. The last one that happened was probably Hurricane Dorian, and we relied on St. John Energy to send a crew over and help us with restoration efforts about partway through that week. Finally, we get into stormwater management, and really the planning side I'll let Aaron talk about how he plans the infrastructure, but we try to make sure the natural waterways are clear and clean. So it's always a struggle with Department of Environment, because a lot of the natural storm management leads into natural creeks or brooks or spillways, I'll say, into the ocean, and those get bunged up with brush and alders and things like that. And sometimes you got to get cleaning them out. But that can be a process with Department of Environment depending on the requirements of the day for those natural courses. The last thing I'd like to talk about is, given all that said, and I think we have a good resilient operation system for Summerside for the key services required for waters for your health and sewers for your health. Water's for life, sewers for health, and electricity is really for business and protection people for heat. A lot of times now everybody's going to heat. We do have limited resources though, as does every smaller community, and that again goes to the 72-hour preparedness advice. Government's usually not prepared to help everybody out all the time, but for a certain time frame they're expected to. So we do that. One large issue that's coming to head for the electric utility is the capability of our on-site power generation. Even though we have wind and solar, we also have a diesel power plant. So that's getting old, and we need to replace it with something that secures energy for times when we're blacked out from the rest of the grid. We experienced one in, I think, I'm thinking November of 2019, possibly after Dorian, there was an issue, and it was a 12-hour outage. It just happened to be, for the community, we went through a rotating power cycle to try to get everybody some heat and some power, but there was a lot of upset people during that rotation of power, and we really couldn't support the full city's operations with our current assets. So about in 2018, staff had presented to the council at the time a new generator. It was a significant investment, but it was declined at the time because it wasn't a green solution. So that'll be coming back to council sometime in the near future to deliberate and debate on that investment for the community's energy security, mainly is what it's for. But there is some value to it as well. That's really a quick snapshot of what Municipal Services does. We do have limited fuel storage for that 72 hours, so on site. So after that, we need to be refueled and things. So I just like to let everybody know we are resilient for a period of time, but there will be a time when staffing and availability of materials becomes an issue. Usually if that happens, we'll notify the CAO and he'll make a decision on Emergency Measures Office getting opened up. No, I'm not aware that it's activated yet, no. Anyway, that's kind of an operation snapshot. I'll hand it over to Heron for more of the planning side and infrastructure management.
Thanks, Greg. As Greg mentioned, I'll talk to you some of it on the capital or new project side and things that we look at on our area. First, I guess, in a couple of different criteria, as Greg mentioned, the water, we have the second well field to give us extra, I'll say, capacity as well as location. If there's ever a problem or an area in one area, at least we're not all in one section of the city. Again, he mentioned again on the infiltration is really just water that leaks into our sewer system, and the numbers are staggering at our treatment plant on a rain event. So we did last fall produce some analysis to try and figure out where in the city would be the highest levels of extra water, we'll call it, getting into our system. So then the next step is trying to identify what that is. Is it bad leaky pipes, or is it everybody hooking their sump pumps up? So as we mentioned, the first part is people don't realize probably what the damage they're doing by doing that. If they all knew that, maybe they would just pump it on the ground like a lot do, and it does go away from your house. And so there's a number of steps that have to get implemented with that. And again, they all take time and resources and of time as well as people's staff time. Again, as far as some of the effects that we're seeing is whether it be the rising sea level so the city did start that with that awareness many years ago without the latest numbers, even as far as 20 years ago whenever they were doing the West End Development Project. And first off, it was the money we were all spending there. First thought was to protect the asset that we were doing, but also that evolved then into the boardwalk and the kilometers that we put in, but it was also to protect that asset. And in doing so, we have our lovely red cliffs, but they just don't stand up to the wave action. And so we, as part of those capital projects, we included import armor stone to protect our shoreline, stop the erosion. And at that same time, we also hired I guess, people that are more in the marine field as far as to properly size that for what event and what size. And they looked at the wave action of the whole harbor, short-term and long-term as well, and to try and have that at a consistent height higher than the existing seawall that we had. So at least it's not all the shoreline, but at that time it was all the shoreline that we're actively doing projects in or the city had owned land on. So again, the mayor had mentioned there was one section there was no boardwalk went in that section, and it was if it's a city-owned property. So that's really where we tried to be proactive at that time to protect our asset as well as to try and raise it. And then potentially if you had to go higher, at least it's something solid that you've already established and could build on. So that's kind of the raise or increase in being aware, even as far back as 20 years ago on the height of our sea level and trying to protect our waterfront and the existing coastline that we had. The next you get into, you mentioned, was the increase in stormwater events. Again, we have a lot of old pipes in the city and former town that are smaller storm pipes and are aged. So again, we go through a process of trying to replace those. And when you replace those, I'm not going to get into it, but there's a lot of factors that go into determine the sign. One is looking at the history of the rainfall events. So we have standard curves that are used, and for the non-critical ones, we'd say that are in streets, we use a 1 in 10 year return event. If it's a critical one under a major passing under a road, we went in a 1 in 100 year event. So those are the criteria that we have been using. Most recently in the last 5 years, the stormwater events you'd hear, we're getting more of these events. So those whole set of curves got readjusted. So we've adjusted in the last 5 years to the newer projections of what the actual rainfall events are. So we're incorporating that now into our designs for the last 5 years, so that we are accounting for the latest. We're not basing our data on 80 years ago. The people that are more experts in that than us have created new curves, which we are using to help our designs to make sure we try and get projects and pipes that are the right size to account for the bigger rainfall events that we are having. You also mentioned having some shovel-ready projects, and as Rob had mentioned to you, we sit down at budget time and we try to come up with the wants and needs and what's. We also try and look at some long-range stuff as well to say this is what's needed, and so we bring forward those to budget deliberations with a lens of being what needs to be done for the overall city as far as. And we have done some of those projects, not that we're not doing them, but we do have some projects that are also shovel-ready if these projects come available. If funding comes available, we do have projects that are ready to go. So that's kind of where we are as far as on rainfall events and water level, and showing us what we have done for 20 years, and what it's on our mind, as well as having some projects that are ready if additional funding becomes available.
Just one follow-up for myself too on that is the current Sunbank project with the electric utility in the city of Summerside solar and battery project. It was looked at for a 100-year climate lens risk in the viability assessment on how to construct it, and that was done prior to the design. So all the suggestions of staying farther away from the shore and things like that were considered on that project through the preliminary design. So one of the things we have been doing, and I'm sure Aaron has as well, is that trying to look at what the new numbers are, like you talked about the stormwater, but there's also higher temperature curves now for the summer and colder winters, hotter summers, those type of things. So those are trying to be factored in as well for when we do things for infrastructure in the city of Summerside.
Thanks, Greg, and thanks, Aaron. And I guess just in terms of where we are right now, in 3 weeks, we'll be starting our budget discussions with council on the priorities for 22-23. And part of the recommendations that'll be coming forward will include some of these items that Aaron and Greg have talked about. That being said, we do have some projects that are potentially shovel-ready if and when funding opportunities come available. We do know that the ISIP program does have a funding stream for climate change mitigation. That being said, there is one other task that certainly we would like to complete sooner rather than later. Between myself and Greg and Aaron, is that we'll take a comprehensive look at the Quest report and really do up a prioritization of what the key recommendations are. There is a lot of information in that report, and we realize there's only going to be so much that we can address like year to year, but it would be good for us and for council to know like what those priorities are, or at least what our recommendations are for those priorities, so that at least you can go into the budget discussions and deliberations with your eyes wide open and fully informed, right? But I guess before we finish up, is there any questions that members of council would have for myself or Director Gregg or Director Aaron?
Do we have,
Go ahead, Norm.
sorry, maybe there are other
Okay.
lights on.
I just want to check, CAO Rob, with your comments that senior management will be going over the Quest report. Would you have any idea as to when those recommendations would be coming back to council, if we're going to be discussing those kinds of things at budget time?
Our goal would be to bring forward some recommendations during the budget process.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I
that's
just,
our goal.
okay, and I just have one more, I just want to clarify it, and this is to Director Gregg. You had mentioned in 2018 that council had declined a new generator, and I guess just my memory's a bit foggy. I was here then, as well as other members. Was that new generator deferred until the Dunsky report? Until there was some considerations brought into that report?
Yeah,
About the different levels of utilities and,
correct. There was a third-party review
Right.
of the suggestion
Yeah.
and on the electric capacity. I think at the time they identified a biodiesel generator in 2025.
Yeah.
So we're looking at that after the Sunbank project is complete to look at
Right.
the next
Yeah.
big investment for the utility, and that's probably it.
yeah, and I think council of that time in 2018, it wasn't that we were solely against it. It was just that we needed to have more information because of the cost outlay that we would learn about in the Dunsky report. And I think that was something that we had those concerns about.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Basil, go
I
ahead.
don't think your light's on.
No,
Oh,
I'm chairing this
I
one.
guess the question I had in my mind, I think Deputy Mayor pretty well asked the same type of question. I was just thinking, come budget discussions, I know everything you just said, but I'm just trying to visualize what that means in dollars, you know. Here come budget time, and I know you haven't got those numbers narrowed down at this point, but, and what department will it be coming through for budget discussions, and will it be Municipal Services, emergency planning? I'm just thinking out loud here, I guess. We'll want to think about it from now until our first meeting, too.
Yeah, most likely, are you talking about the generator? Is that what?
No, I guess
No,
just
sorry.
about the cost for come budget time.
Well, I guess
Recommendations,
it would
cost.
depend on the department, I guess.
Yeah.
If it's, you know, for example, if we're looking at stormwater mitigation vis-a-vis, like looking at the size of culverts across the city, then that would come through tech services. If there's something with respect to emergency backup power for the electric utility, then it will come through electric.
Right.
Now, but in terms of, I guess, just having a comprehensive list of those potential climate change impacts and projects, we can certainly produce a list that, just so you have it as a quick reference tool, right? So,
Okay, that's was my, I was wondering.
Councillor Duran.
Yeah, I guess just to point out, I guess, all of this obviously is very worthwhile, but I guess it's one thing to attempt to prevent or counter the effects of, what's happening, but it's another thing, this is not just Summerside, it's our boundaries, there's not dams in the water where we can do what we can do and it'll stop the water from rising. So I just hope that we're not the only municipality, working on this. I know we're not, but it's certainly a global issue. It's not just a city issue. So I just hope that, there's other municipalities in Canada and across the world that are implementing similar type programs, because, we're not gonna stop the water from coming up anytime soon.
That's true.
Good points.
Councillor Snow.
I think this leads to, every time Brian was talking about stuff there, my mind kept going to our shoreline, and here in the city, it's evident we don't control all of our shoreline. The port, who we know we've been trying to build a better relationship with them of late, but that relationship is not where it needs to be. don't think by any means. And I think that's an important part of building our resiliency, is making sure that relationship is open and transparent, so we know of any issues that might be going on port side, port wise. I drive around the community quite a bit, and what I would call Port 2, which is in behind Sharky's, it's the one fenced off. It appears to me like there's pieces falling off the port into the water. My hope is that it's being maintained properly, but like I said, our communication back and forth isn't where it needs to be, so I can't sit here and say that it is. So if we're gonna dive into these conversations, I think that's a very important part. And I'm sure the port is doing what they, or I hope the port is doing what they need to make sure that it is maintained properly, but we need to have that open communication.
If I can add unofficially, different people that have been doing work for them as far as doing, I think they've done their own analysis and study of, as far as climate change effect on theirs. We haven't seen it, but we've just been asked questions about the infrastructure, because obviously they're in the city, their infrastructure interacts with ours, so we've been getting asked questions. So I'm aware they've done some work. I don't know the details of the work they've done, but they have been active as far as different professionals have contacted us where they were doing work for them to ask about the infrastructure and what have you. So I know they've done work, and I haven't asked for their study or anything like that. They commissioned it themselves, but I know that they were actively pursuing and with interest on the effect of climate change on their properties.
Any other questions?
Just a final
Oh,
comment,
go ahead.
and as we had discussed a number of times over the last, well, for this council regarding the emergency preparedness, some of those kinds of things have come up in discussion with the way things are changing. We kind of got to wander into this probably a little bit more quickly than we thought. I mean, I'm not saying tomorrow or next week or whenever, but it's obvious, you know, what's going on out west, and the fires and the floods and all through the states, and even the couple of storms we had here in the last few years, that it has to be taken into consideration probably a little more quickly now than what we used to think about 10 years ago, because we're seeing things right in front of us now that's happening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
And I just
Councilman, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
First of all, Brian, thank you for the presentation. It's an issue for sure, and it's not going to get any better by the way things are going. And our emergency plan, Mayor Basil, we have considered these issues during our talks and during the last number of years that we've been working on the plan that is going to be presented to council tonight, which is kind of nice, and you'll have an idea on what's in place. And when it's presented to council, then we'll I'm not sure, Rob, how we familiarize the community with our plan to whatever degree they feel they, would like to know. But it will definitely be presented here this evening, which is good. So I just wanted to let your worship know that we have taken all these things into consideration, and thank you. And thank you for your presentations, guys.
Thank you.
And
Councilman
I know
Feely?
we will have and do have a very robust emergency plan. My hope here in initiating this kind of discussion is stuff that we never have to implement the plan.
Right.
Right.
Just a couple of closing comments. One, as staff go back and kind of take a look at it, I'd just like to see, I mean, to me, it's kind of, and maybe it isn't, but it just appears to be kind of piecemeal. Stuff comes forward at budget time and comes from this department, comes from here, that to me, I'd be more comfortable if there was sort of a comprehensive, sort of integrated kind of approach that sort of prioritizes how we tackle this stuff, and over the next, whatever it is, 20 years or 25 years, it's not all going to happen year one, nor should it. So, and I don't know, Rob, how we kind of move to that, we get sort of the long-term strategy here that's integrated, and that we're not getting council at budget times, not getting 4 or 5 things coming from different departments.
Right.
We really don't know which one is the priority, and and we get into the budget scraps, that we have some guidance in that. So it's really around, an integrated, comprehensive, coordinated approach as opposed to a piecemeal approach, for me anyways. And then the second piece of this is, I would really encourage, if as staff is working through this, that, if you haven't, take a look at that FCM tool, that Municipal Climate Adaptation Maturity Scale, because it kind of forces you to think about some of the things that you may not have thought about in this stuff. And it has a lot of really good information in it in terms of, it says, almost like a report card. Yes, we're doing that, or no, we're not doing that. All right, we don't need to do that, and that's fine too. So I would encourage you just to take a peek at that, because and I kind of fell upon it accidentally when I was kind of thinking about this presentation, and it really raises the level of awareness around the stuff. So would encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
And I wasn't going to ask a question, but Councillor McFeely made me think of something else. And thank you, all of you, for the presentation. It was great. I guess I tend to think of things too when Councillor Bryan, when you speak of comprehensive, I always, sometimes we'll hear people say that it has a great shelf life and then you take it off and dust it. I guess and it's not a concern, but I think this council, as this starts to unfold and we talk about it and we work on it or whatever, I think it is something that we also need to be very mindful of, that as senior staff change, as councils change, there's always new people coming forward. So we're hearing about this and the Quest report and those kinds of things, and we know that they're important. But I think we all realize with a new council, it's usually your first 1 or 2 years, it's a pretty steep learning curve and familiarization. So I think when we do anything like this, we have to really have something that is really helpful, that people can see it from the get-go, the work that has been done, why it's so important, and where we are in that fan-out process, because it's something that affects, many things, not just the council working on it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's where my concern sometimes comes.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one final comment.
Go ahead.
I don't want to jump ahead. This is a second final comment, but
All right.
I don't want to jump ahead of somebody else's light. But Justin, you certainly made good points there, and I think it's important that we here in Summerside, if we can be the leader sort of thing here and on PEI to do our thing, and I think with the FCM fundings that may be available and the federal fundings and the provincial dollars that may be available, I'm sure the province and the feds and FCM will support us, because they have in the past when we went after them for the windmills and the solar systems and the electrical vehicles and those kinds of things, to overall environment protection. So I think if we can sort of be out front here and come up with some projects, and I think the province and the feds and the FCM trust the presentations that the city has made to them over the years on many projects, because whether it's the $67 million solar project, they came forth on that, as well as other projects that I think that as we make a presentation to them, I think they'll sit up and pay attention to us, and we can be the leader in some of this. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. That's my fourth or third or second final comment.
No problem. Thank you very much, and thank you, Greg, Aaron, and CAO Rob for the presentation, and thank you, Councilor McFeely, for bringing this forward. Look forward to the report when it's ready. Thank you.
Okay, I believe that may be all that's under the committee's agenda. If anybody else got any further comments before we adjourn? I think there's a couple items here under the Municipal Act for the Committee of the Whole. But there's nothing further. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Snow and seconded by Councillor Drawn. All in favour? Thank you very much.